Creativity takes courage. Henri Matisse. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Denise LaRue Mahlke. She paints with soft pastels, which are to her the purest form of artist color. Unfettered with complicated materials, she is free to respond spontaneously to the unfolding spectacle of the big skies and ancient geology of the American West. I first saw her beautiful atmospheric pastel works of art in person at the Booth Museum a few years ago. It was at a show called Painting Red Rocks Country Past and Present. Her work was displayed alongside the works of G. Russell Case, Matt Smith, and Ray Roberts, among others. Denise says of her work, "Painting allows me to communicate the celebratory beauty of God's creation. Indeed, as we view Denise Mahlke's sensitive paintings, we cannot help but be touched by her deep reverence. The result, we are rewarded with a sense of peace." My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. Denise, I'm really happy to have you on The Artful Painter today. I've been meaning to have you on for quite some time, so it's really great to have you here today.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. It's really an honor. I appreciate it.
Well, you're located in Texas, right? What part of Texas?
I now live in East Texas, near Tyler. That's the largest town near me. But I live kind of away from town a little bit on my son's 5-acre piece of property, and it's just gorgeous here.
So really East Texas and West Texas are still huge.
Miles and miles apart.
so give me a reference. Where would I find Tyler in relation to, say, Dallas or Houston?
I'm about 2 hours east of Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've driven through there.
Not far from Interstate 20, if you're familiar with that route. But all in all, I'm just kind of semi out in the country. And
wow.
Lots of pines like you've got, but not quite as many as you've got.
It starts to transition into hardwoods, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Just amazing. I will tell you this. When I first came here to visit my son and his wife, they've got these huge oak trees. I don't know what kind of oak trees. But after a rain, you get the ferns growing on the branches. And it's the first time ever I'd seen that. And I know that you see that a lot in the East there in Georgia. But I was absolutely thrilled and taken with that. I thought that was so cool.
Well, you mentioned I-20. I-20 is about 1/2 mile that way.
Oh, really?
Sitting in front of me. Yeah. So, and sometimes
I can make a beeline to get over there.
Well, there's a silly side of me, but sometimes when I cross that bridge over I-20 coming to my house, I look west and I say, wow, I would just like to get in the car and just drive all the way to the end of I-20. Heading west.
We have that in common.
Now, you were out here about 3 years ago. We did not meet at that time, but you were at the Plein Air Painters of America event at the Booth Museum, which at the time of recording, this is March 29th, 2021. And back then, I think it was like through the 25th through the 31st of March. So it was right at that time.
Yes. And I was just thrilled to be there. It was kind of a spontaneous sign up and everything, the way that happened. It was kind of fun because I had been teaching at the Art Academy there and was getting ready to, head out and Kent told me about the workshop. And I said, well, is it too early to sign up? And he said, no. So I had the cash in hand. It's plop. And so I was just so thrilled to get in and to be able to study with Skip and Lynn.
So you studied with Skip Whitcomb and Lynn Schmiel.
Yes.
What was that like?
Oh, it was just so much fun. They did, of course, they're great teachers. And Lynn, I think that was the first time he'd been back to teaching in quite a while. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And watching them paint is just fabulous. Learned a lot. Skip was teaching about color. In fact, I just pull out all the notes when I'm working, to experiment around with some of these different combinations. Anyway, they're just, it was great. But the whole experience, hearing the lectures and the panel discussions, all of that, you had to have been thrilled. Is that when the idea came to you?
Yeah, it was during that workshop that I thought about, because I had podcasted before and I had done it on photography. And I thought, well, and the reason I did it on photography was I was learning about filmmaking. And so it gave me an opportunity to talk to a lot of different filmmakers and share what I know. And I thought, well, why don't I do that with painting? Except this time, at least I have a little bit more experience. That was a complete amateur podcasting back in those days. But yeah. And so my two instructors during that event was Matt Smith and Ralph Oberg. So they both agreed to be interviewed. And so they're episodes 1 and 2 of this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, great guys. I studied with Matt. Unfortunately, I think it was only one time. And I had Pastels with me, and every day he's like, why don't you, try oils, give it a shot, you'll catch on, no problem. And I'd done a little bit of oils before that, but I was not confident in them at all. And I thought, well, you know what? That's the only way I'm going to learn how to do them is just jump in. So I think it was the last day of the workshop, I brought the oils out. So he was happy to see that. he would come up to my painting and would like, can I touch your painting? Because he doesn't do pastels that I know of. But so he kind of just leave mine alone. I said, no, touch them. I want you to touch them. It's okay.
So pastels are your medium of choice. Yeah. And which is an extraordinarily beautiful medium. I'm not competent in it at all. I haven't done pastels. But I think it's interesting that you chose to take a workshop from Matt Smith. So I want to understand the thinking there that a pastel artist would take a workshop from someone that is unabashedly an oil painter.
Well, the principles are all the same. He's teaching the great principles of art, value drawing, composition, all of it, color. And so relating that or translating that to pastel, it works out pretty much the same. Oils and pastels, to me, they're similar in how you go about. When I started doing more oil, I would think about, okay, how do I do that in pastel and apply it to the oil and it would work.
Interesting.
So now I'm reversing that and, trying to do some more oils. So it's very similar, the dark to light. And a lot of times I don't start that way. I'll start in the middle values and kind of work out from there. But, I would do the same thing with in designing the number of shapes I would include in my composition, laying down an underpainting in pastel. I would start with darks. And there's a difference, even though they're all soft pastels, there's hard and there's softer. And there's a hard pastel that has probably a little more binder in it or less pigment than the soft ones. And you can put those down first and then use the mineral spirits or alcohol or water to kind of push it, stain the paper with the value of that pastel. So
the pastels, so you use soft pastels, but some are harder than others. Did I hear that correctly?
That's right.
And and that's because of the pigment itself, the material property of the pigment?
Yes, and in the binder that's used. I know with the really soft pastels, they're like butter. They're just so extremely soft. And the reason you don't use them right away is they fill the tooth of the paper too quickly. You have to have a light touch if you do that. I've learned how to use them lightly because a lot of times I may not have quite what I want for the first layers in hard pastel. So I'll pick a soft one and I just have to use a light hand when I apply it.
I hadn't thought of that. So pastels also have the fat over lean principle then.
That's true. That's true.
If I wanted to get started in pastels, what would I get?
I usually recommend like a set of hard pastels and maybe a small half set of Rembrandts, which are kind of a medium, and then maybe a hand-selected few softer ones. And there's different brands. Terry Ludwig makes some beautiful pastels. They're out of, I think he's in Colorado. You don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch, but I always recommend having a nice starter. The thing is, on starter sets, you get a lot of mid-range. You don't get the darks. You don't get the either end of the value scale. So you kind of have to find a good art store and be able to pick out. Or if you know someone who wants to go in, try pastels, buy a set together and split it.
Oh, no, that's an idea.
Yeah, I recommend that to my students because it can be expensive to start. And yeah, just if you could go in with someone and just break those pastels in half and split the set.
So there's no real equivalent to like a limited palette that you would do with tube mixing oil paints and acrylics.
Yeah, the thing with pastel, you can't mix them. You know that you layer them, and that's the optical mixing on your paper. But when I started out, I had a very limited palette, and I remember taking that with me outside, and I would just get myself in a tizzy trying to match something I'm seeing. And then finally it's like, oh, you know what? I can combine these colors, and you combine them on the paper and it's the right value. The color may not be just what I wanted, but at least I've got the right value. And starting limited, it kind of forces you to really learn your materials and what they can do and can't do, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Sure. So there's different kinds of so you've mentioned soft pastels, hard pastels. Yeah. I've heard of oil pastels. I mean, does that fall into this category? Or is that something totally different?
Yeah, it's a whole different medium. And I never did get much into the oil pastels. I do have some oil sticks though that I'm excited to try with oil paints, combining somehow and see if I like that mixed media thing. But I've seen some beautiful oil pastel paintings, but to me, they're definitely not the same thing. Soft pastel, what's really cool about a pastel is pigment itself. It's like a little diamond, So when you put down pastels, you get that layer of, there's actually a sparkle, a refraction from a pastel piece of pigment. So.
Oh, that's interesting. I had never heard that before. Really interesting.
And depending on your ground and all of that, you get this kind of a bit of a sparkle to a pastel. That's why they're very appealing. The vibrancy and the clear, clean color.
So I have a confession to make, Denise, about pastels. I said I never tried them. I actually have touch them. I have a hard time touching them. There's something about that against the paper that's hard for me to accept. Is there a way to minimize that? It's the chalk on the board technique, I guess.
Yeah, right. It's like the fingernails on the chalkboard kind of. And I know some people just never got into pastels because they couldn't stand the feel on the hands. So, yeah, I'd say you could try gloves. I mean, I've tried using latex gloves. They don't work for me.
They take the immediacy out of it, don't they?
Yeah, for me, it's hard I have a hard time with gloves. But plus, I like to use my little fingers sometimes to to knock something down or to blend it out, which you could do with brushes as well, or foam applicators. There's a new pastel, fairly new, it's called Pan Pastel, which you actually put on with looks like a little palette knife, with different attachments for the end, so you can have different strokes that you put down with that. And I've used them a bit more when doing a monochromatic piece, or say I'm mixing charcoal with pastel. I've used them then, and it's really fun. So there you go. You might try that.
so there's, well, I was talking to Lorenzo Chavez in a previous episode of 2 or 3 months ago, and he mentioned that there were different things that they were experimenting with in application of pastel. Yeah.
That's right. And, you can always leave, if you buy pastels with the wrapper, you can always leave the wrapper on there and just peel it back. But what happens with that is you're using more the end of it. And it's, to me, more of a drawing or a sketch. I like to use the broad side of pastel, which mimics a paintbrush stroke.
Exactly.
So you got a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch piece of pastel. And if I'm doing a large painting, I have some really large, like 3-inch long pastels. So you can get some nice big strokes.
and they have a lusciousness all of their own. I mean, I love the oil paint strokes and the textures, but I really do like pastel paintings. There's a beauty in them that's unsurpassed in many aspects. It's funny how we got off onto talking about the medium and the materials and things like that. And I don't normally start off with talking about the mediums.
Well, you get me talking about pastels and I just take off. I just tell me stop.
You're passionate about it. That's great. Yeah. Well, so you have the pastel sticks, but you have to paint on something. So what do you paint on? It's got to be different for pastels than it is for an oil painting. Like we're painting on oil, a hardboard panel or linen or cotton or whatever. Right. So what do you use?
There's all kinds of things out there now, all kinds of paper. Prefer a board. So I either take UArt pastel paper. It comes in different grades. You could get it really rough or very smooth, like a real fine sandpaper. And I like to make my own surface. So what I normally do is take a gator board and seal it with gesso, just completely front and back and the edges. And then I apply a pumice mixture. You could buy this golden brand fine pumice gel. And I usually add a little more pumice or marble dust to it and some distilled water, get it to the consistency of about like yogurt.
Oh, okay.
And apply that with various brushes, or you could use rollers. You could use anything to get the texture you want.
Is that come with a grit rating or something like that?
I think it comes with the opacity and it's pretty fine. That's why I always have to add a little
super
extra.
Fine, yeah. Okay.
I know. I probably could use it right out of the jar like that. But I like to get just a little more grit in there. Then that means less layers that I have to apply to my board. So this one on the easel with the frame is a fairly new piece, and it's on a handmade board.
We're doing a video version as well as an audio version here, but I'm looking at the screen with Denise in center here, and to her right, from my perspective, is a beautiful painting. It looks like plains with a river in it, and clouds are dominant. It's raining, and you can see in the horizon kind of a pinkish orangish the sunlight peeking through, like you would typically see. I assume this must be somewhere in Texas that you did this.
Over Austin.
Oh.
Final approach.
Over Austin. Yeah. I like that. So that's on a hardboard panel. So that's a gatorboard panel that you prepared yourself.
Yes, that's right.
Do you have to do anything special? There's no cover or anything like that in the frame itself, or?
I just have it sitting in there with, but normally a pastel, of course, you get to put it under glass, like museum glass. And the piece behind it on the wall, which is another sky scene, it's also, I believe that one's on paper, mounted to a board and then framed out.
Well, this is all, it's all a learning experience to me because, like I said, I'm not really pastel artist at all. So this is all. Well,
when I travel with them, I have like sheets of glassine or take care to cover them with something. But in my little house studio here, I don't have any shelving like I used to have, where I could just line up the paintings on the shelf on the wall. So I've got paintings kind of sitting around. One's on a bookcase, one's on a speaker, leaning against something. I don't have quite enough room here for paintings in progress.
That I think all of us have that problem. I have an office over here that my wife has set up, and it's just got tons of paintings just leaning up against the wall there. So, they're not gallery worthy, but you kind of can't bring yourself to create a bonfire with them either. So,
well, I like to keep around even the ones that I think are failures. Just there's usually something I find in there, a reason to keep them. Plus, it's kind of fun to look at later. I mean, way later, to see your progress.
Yeah, I've talked about that before. I do like that too. In fact, my wife was teasing me again the other day. She says, she took the very first painting I ever painted. She says, I like that painting. I said, well, I'm glad you do. And I'm glad you have it framed because it helps me see where I've come from.
And what's hard is, you come along in a few years and then you look back and you see something you did back then. It's like, man, I like that better than now. That happens sometimes.
Well, it seems like when you're learning how to paint, you're also just trying to figure out what you like to paint, right? I mean, not everybody knows from the very beginning, I'm going to be a landscape painter. How about you? Was that the case with you? Did you know what you wanted to paint when you got interested in art, or was it something that developed over time? Well,
I think that wanting to do landscape, skyscape was always there, even when I was a kid, because I used to go outside and draw a lot. Now, of course, I was trying to draw birds and animals and such. But when I started in pastels, I had a really strong interest in painting, learning to paint portraits and people. And actually, that's what I did with the pastels to learn them. I was in a portrait, just a model session, so no instruction, which was fun for me to just play. I kind of learned my medium. But I've always liked life drawing classes and keeping my hand in painting people, life drawing sessions, that sort of thing. I guess it was, my kids were quite young. My studio space was the corner of the bedroom. And that was about the time that I thought, okay, I just needed to get out and do landscape. And I knew some artists that painted landscapes. So I definitely had that desire. And so that's kind of taken.
Was that there in Texas? Were you still in Texas?
It was Corpus Christi. And I'm a native Texan, so I've lived here all my life, but in different parts of Texas. So you kind of feel like you're in a new country, moving from one end to the other. Yeah, I'm finding a lot of new, wonderful things to paint here. There's a lot of trees, and I need to work on my trees. So this is a perfect place to be for that.
Your paintings depict in a small area such an expansive subject. The sky is dominant, weather is dominant, atmosphere clearly dominant, and it's done in a very beautiful way. Where does that come from?
Well, I think the desire there, kind of a heart's desire a number of years back that just wanted to learn how to paint the sky and land and having opportunities to be out there. When I started doing some shows and I did some plein air events out west, and boy, that just opened up a whole new world to me. And so started out local, did a lot of Texas landscape, which I still love to do. But when I went out to Colorado, New Mexico, I remember New Mexico at Ghost Ranch, taking workshops with Bob Rome. Yeah, a group of friends and I would go out there. And most of the classes I did pastels, and then I started taking oils with me out there.
Now, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Bob Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a pastelist?
Well, yes, or he's more oils now, but I know he does a wide range of mediums. But when I studied with him, we were mostly pastel.
So I found this book in my library. I'm going to have to go read it now.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in a long time. so I just held up the book just so everybody can understand.
Right.
The painterly
approach. Hey, you're good.
The painterly
right
approach.
There.
the painterly approach, an artist's guide to seeing, painting, and expressing by Bob Rome. What an incredible book. I just thumbed through it this morning because I was reading some of your articles there, and I thought, wow, I thought I've got that book. I need to go back and look at it.
Well, he was a great teacher. Just learned a lot. That was the start for me of learning about John Carlson and, the guide to landscape painting and, a value system of planes, theory of planes, and your outdoor painting. And that just made a huge difference in how I painted the landscape. I mean, I'd go out there just like every other landscape beginner wanting to paint everything I saw. I think through that and a lot of his workshops, I finally started seeing, how to break up the landscape and simplify it. That's a big thing. I still struggle with that sometimes, trying to put too much, but I do really enjoy just keeping almost a minimalist approach. So that's I'm drawn to work by artists who do that.
The more minimalist type artists.
Yeah. And, being on Instagram, I've learned about a lot of new artists.
Oh, my goodness. You can't keep it. It's astonishing how many people are so good at this stuff.
Yeah.
Makes me just want to just close up the palette. No.
Never.
No, I'm not going to quit.
Good. Yeah.
There's a lot of inspiration out there. You've studied with.
There is.
I know when we first started this conversation, you mentioned you took the workshop from Lynch Mill and Skip Whitcomb, which he does a lot of pastel work as well. And then, if I remember correctly, you also studied with T. Allen Lawson, and you just mentioned Bob Rome. Harley Brown, I think, was somebody.
No, I never got to study with Harley. About the time I started doing pastels, and I was met some artists in this model session. That's when I started hearing about Scottsdale Artist School. And at the time, I had young kids and I was raising kids, and it's like, oh, that was a dream to go out to Scottsdale and take a class. But he had already stopped teaching there about the time I finally did get to Scottsdale. But I have his book, and he's recently had it reprinted. I think it's Eternal Truths for Every Artist.
Oh, yeah.
That Harley wrote.
I don't have that one yet, so.
Oh, you need that one.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful, really great book. It's right up there with the Carlson's landscape book. And I know you can still get that in reprint, I think paperback is $10 or something. Yeah, I studied with Tim about 4 different times and had an immense influence on my work and how to approach my work. And,
can you give a specific example of how he did influence the way you work?
I don't think there was a single day that we talked about technique and skill and how to in his workshop. It was all principle, but it had a lot to do with kind of like what Shanna Kunze said about Dan Pinkham. Writing, taking the time to observe and writing poetry about what he's seeing. And when I took from Tim, a lot of the big influence on me was doing the thumbnails and learning how to do different approaches to a scene, different high key, low key, learning how to take the time to think about what I was seeing and asking the question, why did I stop here? What is it that attracted me to this scene? Just giving more thought. That
so
really,
I guess he kind of influenced you to slow down and ask the why. Why are you doing this?
Yes, exactly. And really encouraging kind of mentoring type experience. So I learned a lot from Tim, and I keep thinking, okay, one more workshop. And every time I try to sign up, he says, you don't need to take a workshop from me. I don't know about that.
Well, and is he a pastelist as well? Or I thought he was just oil paint.
No, he's does some
both?
Mixed media, but mainly oil, that's his medium. But I've seen some pieces like at Prita West a few years back. He had a mixed media pastel piece.
Well, you see what I'm doing there, and I think my listeners will pick up on my prejudice here. So it's part of my learning process. So please bear with me. Because I'm equating everything to a medium, but really what you're saying, what you're learning from these great artists is not the technique. I mean, you said that and it just went through my brain, and now I'm just recalling it. Oh yeah, she's already said this. It wasn't about the how-to. You don't take the pastel and lay it on its side and then do that. It's more about developing the subject matter.
Exactly. And, the same with Matt, learning those principles and applying it to what I do with pastel. And I took from Skip the first time because he's such a masterful pastelist. But I found out once I got in the workshop that, he doesn't even bring his pastels to outdoors with him. He does all oils. And all his pastel work is in studio. Now, sorry, Skip, if I didn't get that quite right, but I believe that's, what he...
I think you're right, yeah.
And his pastels are like some of the best I've ever seen. I'm much inspiration from him.
Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Is it oil? Is it an oil painting or a pastel? The way
I get that too sometimes, because you don't see if it's museum glass, you don't see the glass when you first look at a pastel painting, and I've had people say that.
Well, I was looking at some of your paintings, and had I not known that you work in pastel, I would have not immediately have said, "Oh, that's a pastel." I mean, it doesn't scream pastel at you. It's very it's a painterly approach, which is just as applicable to pastels as it is oil painting. It doesn't scream that the medium. But it does. It sings the praise of the landscape, of the creator that created that landscape. And so you do see that in the painting, and that comes through very nicely in those paintings.
Oh, thank you. That thrills me to hear that. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I do a lot of just observing in the field. And I know that's key to so many artists out there. You know, if you just take the time. I'm always amazed at artists who can paint the transition of, into twilight to night. Right now, I'm really excited about trying some nocturnes, but just being out there, is the inspiration. And it's for me, it's the time of either prayer or just praise, kind of a worship even. I mean, it's really, because you're out there in awe of the master artist.
Yeah, I mean, he, the grand creator, you can't top that.
That's
all
right.
we can do is make a mark that's some impression of our appreciation, or an expression of our appreciation for what has already been done.
And and I think we're made to create. So we have that in us to want to make or create.
And there's just something about seeing paintings up close and real. But makes
all the difference.
Yeah, it does. But see, now you're one of the few guests that I've had on the show that I've been able to see your work up close. You were at a show here at the Booth Museum with Russell Case and Matt Smith. I'm probably messing up the title, but it was about painting Red Rock country. And so your paintings were part of that.
You got it.
Yeah. And so that's where I first saw your artwork, and it was quite beautiful. I actually have several pictures that I took that's in my private photo library. Yeah, so it's pretty neat. Yeah,
that was an experience. Real honor to show with those guys, Ray Roberts, Matt Smith, Russell Case. And
I forgot about Ray Roberts. Yes, he was there too. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And to do that show, and Maynard Dixon and Edgar Payne, there were a few representative pieces of them in the front as you came in. And it was just a wonderful experience. And each of us also taught workshops during the time of the exhibit. So
I didn't take yours, Denise. I'm sorry.
It was pastel. I understand.
Well, I would have benefited from that. So that was the very first workshop I ever took in my life, was at that event. And it was from Matt Smith.
Okay.
So Matt Smith was my first instructor. But that was a great event. It was a great event. How did that come about?
Actually, we had in common a show in Montana. There was a Artistic Horizons and Artistic Vision. There were two versions of the show that Daryl Tinnicliff put together. And in fact, he worked out this exhibit at the booth with Seth. And when I got the call from him, hey, would you like to take part in this? We don't have much time, but, if you'd like to do it. And I surely jumped at the chance.
When he said there's not much time, I mean, how much time was he talking about?
Yeah, probably, less than a year, Might have been 6 or 7 months.
Couple of months before.
Oh, no. But it was still kind of nerve-wracking. But I think, all of us, pulled in paintings that they weren't all like brand new. And I've discovered working with museums that you don't necessarily have to have all new, exactly just brand new pieces for a show. In fact, I had two pieces from that show that were borrowed pieces that I was honored that they loaned them to me to put in it. make sure I had enough.
Well, that's wonderful. I can't imagine a collector not wanting to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what a privilege it is, to not only own your artwork, but then be able to share it in such a prestigious place like the booth. Do you take your pastels outdoors? You do outdoor painting with your pastels?
I do. I have a small box that I take that's got like 100 or so broken pieces of pastel, varying sizes. And then I have a small box that I take that's the harder pastels. So try to keep it at a minimum, but I can do quite a bit with that. But lately, I'm like, okay, just take the oils out. So I'm doing more oil studies now. In fact, behind me, you can see some oil studies that I've got for pastel painting, which is the charcoal you asked about earlier, the charcoal study. It's 2448.
24 by 48 charcoal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now that I don't take out. I mean, I would like to try the painting larger outdoors. That's intriguing to me. I want to give it a shot. But this was a study done in charcoal to the size I'm going to paint my pastel. That's why it's kind of marked up with different.
So it has like grid lines on there.
Yeah, I don't grid, but I'm finding, when I go larger, I'm having to do a little bit of that. So I've already got the pastels started, but I'm looking at this charcoal and thinking how much I like it. So I may have to do some large charcoals, and I'm working on a project. So it's going to have oils, pastels, and drawings. So,
well, you're just getting all the mediums in there. You're a virtuoso. That's great. Yeah.
Well, I love charcoal, and when I started painting, trying alcohol with like isopropyl alcohol with charcoal, and doing just actually painting with the charcoal powder. That's so much fun. That I want to do some more of that. So, which works great on large pieces. The study that I have here that you're seeing a little bit of is just a printing paper. It's very slick, and it's fun to just try charcoal on that, because I can take it out, move things around pretty easily without staining
so you
the
mean
paper.
It's like coated paper? Is what you mean?
Yeah, it's like it came from an actual printer. They have these big rolls of paper that they get down to the bottom of the roll, and they sell them for very cheap. And I picked up several rows, which are great because they're like 36 or 40 inches by, yards and yards of paper. And they're perfect for doing the life-size study to go with the piece.
Well, where do you go? Where do you find something like that? I didn't even know that was available.
This has been quite a while. I've been carrying them around for a long time. It's taken me this long to use them up, but they're great for kids and grandkids too,
Note to self for my grandkids.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this was called a Miller Blueprint in Austin. I don't know if they're even still around, but they would just over in the corner, you'd see these rolls of paper, and you could buy several rolls for under $20.
I didn't know that you could buy something like that.
Yeah. So when I say printmaking, it's not like the nice BFK or Reeves or any of those wonderful
This is it's just for scratch work. Yeah.
Yeah. Almost like butcher paper,
Yeah, it's not precious, so you're not afraid to, that didn't work.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great for that. I do like to do thumbnails, so, I was thinking
So what do you do? What do you use to do that with?
I have various sketchbooks I'll take out, and I'll just do several on a page. And so I'll do the same scene over and over.
Is that like a pencil sketch or something? Or?
Oh, yeah, pencil or ink. But normally I use a really soft pencil and just do no tan and and sometimes a full value study. And I'm trying to get in the habit of doing a really nice drawing of the scene on location, a frameable piece if I wanted to do that. But normally, like my studies, my thumbnails, all of that is pretty private. I usually don't sell studies, keep them around for ideas. So
I've seen one painter that does that. He sells the notans that he creates with his paintings.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I've known a few artists that do. And I love looking at other artists' sketchbooks. And it's just a real treat to be able to see that. And mine, I think, are more like I can read the language, but I don't think anybody else can.
Well, I was thinking more in terms of no one can read my handwriting. Yeah.
Speaking of handwriting, I mean, when you're out, Carl, I do this. I will make notes and actual. Sometimes I'll just do some color swatches. I won't do a full-fledged color study, but with the drawing, the value study, and notes, and maybe a few little color notes. That is just invaluable to your studio work. And I much prefer to work from that, even though I do have tons of photos, reference photos. Most of my information, as you probably know, is just from your studies, your drawings.
I think those are great memory aids. I've gotten better at that because I don't know. It seems like even when I was writing in my sketchbook early on, I found myself wanting it to be good, failing to understand that the reason I'm doing this is to help note what I'm seeing here. And then I can return to the studio and use this information at some future point. It's like riding a bicycle, learning how to do art. You know that?
Oh, yeah. When you're out there, there's so many things to think about. Some of the best work I've actually done outside is when I've got, oh, man, I got to leave or a storm's coming. I've got 30 minutes, 45 minutes maybe to get this done. And you just get after it and you're not thinking so hard on everything. Of course, earlier I said I do like to think about things, but I think it's more observing and getting to know, watching the light. And if you don't sketch it down, you're still gaining that information, being a better observer.
So do you have a memorable story or experience from where you're outdoors, you're painting, you're gathering your notes, and something amazing or humorous happened to you?
I love painting out west, and I started going out west when I became an artist with the Maynard-Dixon Country, and that was like 2003 or 4, I think. Anyway, every year we go out there, and when I discovered Vermilion Cliffs in like 2008, I was hooked. It's just one of my favorite places to go and to be. But this particular October, I was with a friend. We made a trip out there. I think it was a year my husband passed away. And she was like, okay, we need to go on a trip. So we went out there, and it was a full moon. And we painted by the light of the moon. I mean, I actually sat there.
That must have been an experience to do that.
Oh, yeah. Just sit there and be able to look at my sketchbook and draw by the light of the moon with no headlamp or anything. It was incredible. And that's just that whole area, northern Arizona, southern Utah, around Zion National Park, Mount Carmel. All of that area is just unending inspiration and one of my favorite places to go. So that kind of opened up doors for me too, going out west, to paint. And so a lot of the work I have right now is from there. A little bit of Yellowstone and all those experiences. I did an artist residency up in Sheridan, Bighorn, at the Brenton Museum. That was in 2018. And then 2019 went back for the show because I had just started this artist in residence program. So that in itself, just being in the Bighorn Mountains, that whole
my goodness,
wonderful area, I could just say, just being there is an experience. Just got to visit Tim Lawson's studio, and
so is that where he is? Is that he's in
Sheridan? He's from Sheridan, but I think he's Sheridan and Maine still. I think he does back and forth, but a lot of his oh my goodness, I think his show there in Sheridan was called Hometown, I think. And it's just, if you've not seen the work from that, I have the catalog. It's really amazing to take a look at what he did just right there in Sheridan.
I haven't seen that. I saw his show here at the booth a couple of years ago.
I missed that.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Oh my goodness, that was good. But I digress. How long was your residency there?
A little over 2 weeks.
Nice.
And did it in September. So it's there a little early before the fall color. When we left, I actually did it with another artist. And by the time we left, the color was just starting to show up. But it was still just absolutely amazing weather and beautiful countryside, and meeting artists there at the Brenton. Joel Olson, printmaker, he paints as well. But that was one of the things we got to do is visit studios.
Oh.
So it was a real treat.
So when you're out in a place like that, how do you say, this is it? This is what I want to paint?
Well, it's taken a long time for me to finally get it in my head that you don't want to spend half the day that you have to go paint driving around and looking for the perfect place. Usually it helps me if I get out and just walk around and look, and eventually, I will find, like, go down a lonesome road somewhere and just pull off, and there'll be something light, the sky. I mean, there's something that'll grab me, but I still have to narrow it down. And a lot of times you don't see that right off the bat. And you've probably had this happen where you're driving along in your car and you see it and you circle back, you go back and go, wow. And then you get out of your car and you walk down and the whole perspective changes.
It does.
But it's definitely learning experience getting out there.
Do you use reference photos as well to your sketches?
I do. Yeah, I do. I used to use my computer monitor in my studio, and being in this new place, it's so small anyway. I just actually make television screen the monitor. So I can stand way back from it and just look at that. So that's helpful. But normally, a lot of times you get going on the painting, you're letting that painting evolve and it kind of speak to you instead of looking at all the reference. But the best thing, of course, is your study. You go back to that roadmap, as Tim Lawson would call it. That's your roadmap, your thumbnails, Okay.
So let's talk about the future, Denise. What's, hopefully this pandemic thing will start to wind down eventually and we can hit the road traveling. What's next for you? Where are you going to go as soon as you can hop in that car and go?
I do have a trip coming up in June, actually, to Colorado and up north of Steamboat Springs.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that because I can go see the exhibit that's at the Steamboat Art Museum.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys out there, those buddies.
Moberg, Young, and, and Smith, I'm looking
forward to that.
Sounds like a Western, doesn't it? So like a
Western, it does.
The Magnificent Four.
And really, that's the one big thing I got planned. But really, overall, the rest of this year, I'm working on a project for an exhibit next year.
Can you give us a sneak peek?
Well,
I may be asking asking you to talk about something you're not supposed to, so I'm sorry.
Well, no, actually, it's kind of getting out there already, and it seems a little early yet to talk about it, but it's been a real experience because this is an idea that I've had maybe 10 years ago. And I just was inspired to do this show with focused on skies and, at different weather forms and everything. But I don't know, it just stayed with me. And I played around with the ideas and I was doing more skyscapes. And then I got into more intimate scenes. And that was my focus for a while. Kind of like to follow a theme. But this show's called The Heavens Declare, celebrating the glory of the skies. And it's set for April 1st through July 9th next year at the Museum of Western Art, Kerrville, Texas.
Fantastic. I hope I get out there and see that. Yeah.
Oh, I hope so. I am so thrilled to have curated it. And we've got 11 artists participating. And it'll be an amazing show. I think the whole premise to me is just giving glory to the creator. And also, I think looking up, hopefully it will be an inspiring and, uplifting kind of show. And of course, the artists in it, they all paint very different from each other. And I think the inspiration, of course, from nocturne to sunset, sunrise, twilight, storm. I mean, it'll run the gamut, I think, of what inspires each one. Anyway, I focused on doing more skies the rest of this year and excited about being out in Colorado in June during the monsoon season, so to speak, and looking forward to being in the mountains.
Well, that's wonderful. We will look forward to seeing more news develop on that exhibit.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for asking about it.
Now, where can people find out about you, Denise?
I have a website, and it's dlaruemahlke.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, though I haven't done as much on Facebook in recent months and years. It seems I've still got a page though, and workshops. There'll be workshops involved next year with the exhibit. So I'll be teaching out in Kerrville in early May next year, and it will likely be a pastel landscape and on painting skies, of course.
Yeah, well, that's nice.
So looking forward to that.
Well, Denise, it's been a real pleasure having you on The Artful Painter. I'm glad we finally got a chance to meet and talk today. I've been wanting to do that a long time and so happy that you joined us today.
Well, me too. It's been my pleasure and really enjoy it. I like what you're doing and just appreciate being a part of it. Thank you.
Very much appreciate Denise Mahlke taking the time to talk with me on this show, and I'm glad to be able to share that conversation with you. I enjoy talking with her, and I know you will enjoy listening to her as well. Be sure to check out her website. It's at dlaruemahlke.com. The link is in the show notes. That'll get you there the fastest way. So just click on the show notes on the link there, and that'll get you to her website and all her beautiful works of art that she has on display there. I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to the associate producers of The Artful Painter. These are people who have given their financial support to the show with their generous donations. Now today I'd like to acknowledge a new donor, that is Freeman Dodsworth. And I want to encourage everyone to go view his website. It's freemandodsworth.com, an amazing artist. I will have a link in the show notes, and you can also find a link to his website, as well as a complete list of all the associate producers, all those who have made a donation to The Artful Painter. You'll find it on theartfulpainter.com/donate. There are some amazing websites there. I encourage you to go check it out. It's a lot of fun to look at. So again, thank you to all the supporters of The Artful Painter. Your contributions to this show do make a difference. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of The Artful Painter. May your tubes of paint be full of colors, and may your brush strokes be laid down with confidence. I'll see you all in the next edition of The Artful Painter.
Picture on the TV.